Tell me why you're stopping me before you decide who I am." Simone Carter's voice was calm enough to carry through the quiet courthouse corridor without turning heads, but Officer Daniel Willis did not answer immediately. At 7:42 that morning, Simone had already cleared courthouse security and was walking toward courtroom 4B, dressed in her charcoal pantsuit, ivory blouse, and black low heels. Her shoulder-length black hair was styled in a smooth side-parted silk press, and nothing about her appearance announced the position she held inside the building. That was exactly how she preferred to arrive before taking the bench. A few minutes earlier, Willis had received instructions to locate Tanya Brooks, a defendant who had cleared security but had not appeared where court staff expected her. The information he had was limited: a black woman around 40 years old, dressed in business attire, believed to be headed toward courtroom 4B. When Willis saw Simone approaching that corridor, the description was close enough to justify a question. "Ma'am, stop right there," he said. Simone stopped. She had spent enough years around courthouse security to understand that officers sometimes needed to verify someone's identity. "What do you need?" Willis stepped closer, maintaining a professional distance. "Your name." "Simone Carter." He paused. The name he had been given was Tanya Brooks. For a moment, the mismatch should have narrowed the problem. Instead, Willis looked past Simone toward the courtroom doors. "Where are you headed?" "Courtroom 4B." That answer seemed to matter more to him than the name that did not match. "I need you to come back toward security." Simone did not move. Her expression remained controlled, but something in the exchange had changed. "Why?" "We need to straighten something out." "Then tell me what you're trying to straighten out." Willis glanced toward the radio clipped near his shoulder. "There's someone we're trying to locate. And you think that person is me?" He did not answer directly. "I need you to come with me." Simone studied him for a second. She had not raised her voice, stepped toward him, or tried to leave. "You asked my name," she said. "I gave it to you. Does the name you have match mine?" Willis shifted his stance. "Ma'am, I'm giving you a lawful instruction. I'm asking you a factual question." The corridor remained ordinary around them. A clerk disappeared through an office door. Somewhere farther down the hall, a cart rolled across the polished floor. There was no crowd gathering, no spectacle yet. Only two people facing a problem that could still have been solved with basic verification. Simone understood something Willis apparently did not. The first assumption was not necessarily the most important decision he would make that morning. What mattered was what he did after receiving information that challenged it. "Officer," she said, "if you're looking for someone named something other than Simone Carter, verify that before you treat me like I've done something wrong." Willis held her gaze. He had a description that loosely matched her and a destination that matched exactly. He also had a name that did not match at all. Instead of resolving the contradiction, he pointed back toward the security checkpoint. "We're going back downstairs until I confirm who you are." Simone stayed where she was for one more beat. She was no longer being asked a question. Her movement through the courthouse was now being restricted because Willis had decided the information supporting his assumption mattered more than the information contradicting it. She looked at him steadily. "Then I want it clear that I'm cooperating, and I want to know exactly why I'm being stopped." Willis motioned toward security again. "Walk with me, ma'am." Simone finally turned in the direction he indicated, but the question he had avoided was now the one that mattered most. With the wrong name already in front of him, what would it take for Officer Willis to reconsider the woman he had decided she was? Simone walked beside Willis toward the security area, keeping her pace measured. After several steps, she stopped before they reached the elevators. "There is an easier way to settle this," she said. "My courthouse identification is in my jacket pocket. You can look at it." Willis immediately raised one hand. "Keep your hands where I can see them." Simone left them at her sides. "Fine. You can remove it yourself, or you can have another officer retrieve it. I am giving you permission." Willis did neither. "We will handle identification downstairs." Simone looked at him carefully. "Why take me downstairs when you can verify me here?" Willis glanced toward courtroom 4B. "Because I am responsible for locating someone who was supposed to report for court." "Someone named Tanya Brooks?" Simone asked. His expression tightened just enough to answer the question. "So you do have a different name." As Willis spoke, a white male attorney who had been approaching from farther down the corridor reached the controlled hallway. His courthouse credential was already clipped visibly near his belt. Willis glanced at it, recognized the access marker, and let him continue toward courtroom 4B. The attorney continued without stopping. Simone watched him disappear through the doors, then looked back at Willis. You just verified him in 5 seconds. This is a different situation. Then verify why it is different. Her tone remained even. She was not refusing to cooperate. She was making Willis account for decisions that were becoming harder to explain as routine security. My identification is available. My name is available. The courthouse directory is available. You have several ways to check who I am without guessing. A court clerk stepped out of a nearby administrative office carrying a folder. She looked towards Simone, recognition crossing her face, then noticed Willis handling an active security interaction and stopped near the doorway without interrupting. Simone did not call on her for help. Instead, she kept the focus on the information Willis could verify for himself. Simone did not use the interruption to announce her position. Instead, she focused on the simpler issue. Call whoever gave you the name Tanya Brooks, she said. Ask whether Tanya Brooks identified herself as Simone Carter. Or check the employee directory. Either one would take less time than this conversation. Willis reached toward his radio but did not request either verification. A transmission came through before he could speak. Dispatch reported that Tanya Brooks had still not been located at the place court staff expected her. Willis looked at Simone as if the update strengthened his position. Simone caught the shift immediately. That tells you she is missing from where she is supposed to be, she said. It does not tell you that I am her. Willis replied. It means I am not clearing anyone until I know what is going on. You cleared the attorney. He showed credentials. And I offered mine. Willis exhaled through his nose. We are done debating this. Simone felt frustration rise, but she kept it from controlling her voice. She understood that arguing louder would not improve the evidence. Instead, she looked at the digital clock mounted above the hallway intersection and fixed the time in her memory. Then she looked back at Willis. For the record, I gave you my name. I offered identification. I asked you to check the courthouse directory. I asked you to verify the defendant's name. I am cooperating with you. Willis squared his shoulders. Then cooperate and come downstairs. The situation had changed again. The question was no longer whether Willis possessed enough information to check Simone's identity. He did. The question was why every piece of information that contradicted his assumption seemed to carry less weight than the one radio message he believed confirmed it. Willis gestured toward the elevators again. We are going downstairs. Simone held his gaze. I already told you I will cooperate. I am asking you not to put your hands on me when I am walking voluntarily. For a moment, Willis said nothing. Then he stepped closer and took hold of her upper arm. Simone instinctively pulled her arm free, taking half a step back. Do not grab me. I am not resisting you. Willis reacted before the situation required it. His open hand struck the side of her face once, a brief act that shocked Simone more for its suddenness than its force. The nearby clerk froze beside the office doorway. Simone did not strike back, move toward Willis, or raise her hands. She simply stared at him, stunned, then steadied herself. Is your body camera recording? She asked. Willis looked momentarily caught off guard by the question. Yes. Good. Her voice was quieter now, but more deliberate. Then do not turn it off. Willis lowered his hand and seemed to recognize that the encounter had crossed into something different. You pulled away from me. I told you I was cooperating. I told you not to grab me. You do not get to decide how I conduct a security stop. And you do not get to ignore every fact that does not fit your assumption. Before Willis could respond, his radio came alive. The message was short and unmistakable. Tanya Brooks had been located on the first floor near the clerk's office after going to the wrong reporting area. Court personnel had confirmed her identity. Willis became still. Simone watched his expression change as the information settled in. There was no longer any factual uncertainty. Tanya Brooks was downstairs, and the woman standing in front of Willis was not her. So now you know, Simone said. Willis released a slow breath. We still need to address what just happened. Yes, Simone replied. We absolutely do. The difference was that Willis no longer controlled the meaning of those words. Minutes earlier, he had been treating Simone's identity as the problem to be resolved. Now his own decisions had become the issue. The clerk remained nearby, but Simone did not ask her to intervene or demand that anyone take sides. She glanced at Willis's body camera and then toward the security camera mounted above the hallway intersection. I want the video preserved, she said. Willis frowned. Ma'am, I said we are going to sort this out. Dispatch just confirmed you had the wrong woman. Preserve the recording. We are going to sort this out from the record. Willis started to answer, then stopped. The accusation that had justified his approach was gone. He could no longer claim Simone was Tanya Brooks, and he did not try. What remained was narrower and far more consequential. Whether grabbing Simone and striking her after she pulled away could be justified by the circumstances that actually existed, rather than the circumstances Willis had assumed. Simone looked again at the body camera. For the first time that morning, she was no longer trying to prove who she was. The evidence had already done that. What came next would depend on whether the same evidence could establish what Officer Willis had chosen to do before he finally learned he was wrong. Willis recovered first. "You pulled away while I was trying to escort you," he said, his voice controlled now. "That is what happened." Simone kept her eyes on him. "What happened started before I pulled away." She did not need to repeat every missed opportunity to verify her identity. The cameras had recorded the exchange, and dispatch had already established the most important fact. Tanya Brooks was downstairs. Simone was not. Willis opened his mouth to respond, but the door to courtroom 4B swung open behind them. Thomas Reed stepped into the corridor. At 54, Reed had spent enough years as a courtroom bailiff to recognize when an ordinary delay had become something else. His attention went first to Simone, then to Willis, then back to Simone. Concern tightened his expression. "Your Honor, are you all right?" Willis turned toward him. The silence that followed lasted only a moment, but it changed the balance of the hallway completely. Willis looked at Simone again, this time with recognition replacing suspicion. "Your Honor," he repeated. Reed moved a little closer. "Judge Carter, your docket is due to begin shortly. Do you need medical assistance?" Simone touched the side of her face briefly, then lowered her hand. "I want to be checked, but first I need this incident documented properly." Willis stared at her as the implications settled in. "I did not know you were a judge." "That is not the problem," Simone said. "If knowing my job would have changed how you treated me, then we need to examine what happened before you knew it." Willis shifted his weight. "I was responding to a security issue. You pulled away when I tried to escort you." "Then that is what your report should say," Simone replied. "And the recording should show what happened before it." Reed looked toward Willis's body camera. Simone followed his gaze. "Thomas, please contact the courthouse administrator and the security supervisor. Tell them I want the body camera footage preserved, along with the hallway security video and the radio traffic connected to this call." Reed nodded. "Yes, Your Honor, and ask someone else to handle the preservation request. I do not want anything routed through me that should be handled independently." Willis seemed surprised by that. Simone understood why. In the space of a few seconds, he had learned that the woman he had treated as a missing defendant was a judge in the very courthouse he was assigned to protect. She could have made the moment about rank. Instead, she was making it about procedure. "Judge Carter," Willis began, "if I had known." Simone interrupted him without raising her voice. "That sentence is exactly why the record matters." She looked directly at him. "Whatever happened here has to be evaluated based on what you knew at each point, not on what you learned about me afterward." Reed stepped aside to make the calls. The clerk who had witnessed part of the encounter remained nearby, but Simone did not question her or ask for a statement. That would be someone else's responsibility. Her own role was simpler: preserve what existed and prevent her position from deciding the outcome. Willis no longer had to determine who Simone Carter was. That question had been answered in the most dramatic way possible, yet Simone refused to let the answer become his excuse. The next question belonged to the evidence. What had Willis known? When had he known it? And what choices had he made before anyone called her Your Honor? Thomas Reed returned a few minutes later with the courthouse security supervisor, while another administrator arranged for Simone to be examined in a private office near the clerk's suite. Simone accepted the medical check because she understood that documentation mattered more than appearing unaffected. Once it was finished, she made one request before discussing whether her morning docket needed to be delayed. "Has the preservation request been started?" Simone asked. The supervisor nodded. "Body camera, hallway video, radio traffic, and dispatch records are being secured now." "Good. Then I want someone other than me deciding what happens." "Next." The supervisor nodded. "We can secure those records." "Good. I also want someone other than me deciding what happens next." That answer drew a brief look from Thomas. Simone noticed it. I am the person involved in the complaint, she explained. Being a judge does not make me the right person to investigate it. She requested that the appropriate administrative process handle the incident and that any disciplinary determination remain outside her control. It was not an act of generosity toward Willis. It was a boundary. If the evidence supported his explanation, the record should show that. If it did not, her title should not be what decided the consequence. Willis had been moved away from the immediate area while supervisors documented the incident. Simone did not ask to confront him again. She had already heard his explanation. She had pulled away while he was escorting her. Repeating the argument in another hallway would establish nothing new. The useful question was whether the recordings supported his description of the encounter and, just as importantly, what had happened before he put his hand on her arm. Thomas asked quietly, "Do you still want to take the bench this morning?" Simone considered the question rather than answering from pride. Her face was sore, and she was angry in a way she did not want to carry into someone else's case. "Delay the first matter briefly," she said. "If I am cleared and I can do the job fairly, I will hear the docket. If I cannot, we find another judge." That decision mattered to her. What Willis had done could not become a reason for someone appearing before her to receive less patience or less fairness. Before Thomas left, Simone added one more instruction. "Do not discuss what happened with anyone who does not need to know. Let the review happen through the proper channels." Later that morning, after she had been cleared and had enough time to regain her focus, Simone entered courtroom 4B in her judicial robe. There was no announcement about the incident. She handled the cases before her according to the record in each one. Elsewhere in the courthouse, the process she had requested had already begun. The body camera file was secured before it could be overwritten. The relevant hallway footage was preserved. Radio transmissions and dispatch records were identified by time. What had started as one officer's assumption and one woman's objection was becoming something neither of them could control through memory or authority alone. The reviewers would be able to place Willis's words beside Simone's, then place both against timestamps and video. The question was no longer who had the stronger title inside the courthouse. It was whether the independent record would support the choices Willis said he had made for security reasons, or reveal that the evidence had been pointing him somewhere else long before he finally listened. By the time the independent review began comparing the preserved records, the encounter no longer depended on whose memory sounded more convincing. The sequence could be reconstructed minute by minute. Willis's initial decision to approach Simone was not treated as misconduct by itself. He had been looking for Tanya Brooks, a black woman around 40 years old who had passed through courthouse security and failed to report where expected. The description was broad. Simone was walking toward the correct courtroom, and asking her identity had been a reasonable first step. What followed was harder to explain. The body camera captured Simone, giving her name as Simone Carter. The dispatch information identified the missing defendant as Tanya Brooks. Those names did not match. The recording then captured Simone offering the courthouse identification inside her jacket and proposing that another officer retrieve it if Willis did not want her reaching into her pocket. He declined both options. The hallway security video added another detail. During the same encounter, a white male attorney approached the controlled corridor with his courthouse credential already visible near his belt. Willis glanced at the access marker and permitted him to continue after only a brief check. That comparison did not prove what Willis believed about Simone, but it established that rapid credential verification was available and had been accepted for another person within minutes of her own request. The records also confirmed that Simone suggested checking the courthouse directory and verifying Tanya's name through the original call information. Neither step was taken before Willis decided to escort her downstairs. His strongest defense remained the radio transmission stating that Tanya had not yet been located. Willis had interpreted that message as support for continued suspicion. The reviewers noted the problem with that reasoning. The transmission established only that Tanya's location remained unknown. It supplied no new evidence that Simone was Tanya. Then came the physical encounter. The synchronized video showed Willis taking Simone by the upper arm after she had agreed to walk downstairs while asking not to be touched. It showed Simone pulling her arm away and verbally stating that she was not resisting. It also recorded Willis's brief use of force immediately afterward. Nothing in the footage required anyone to accept Simone's account simply because she was a judge and nothing required them to assume Willis had begun the morning intending to mistreat her. The timeline did not have to prove what Willis believed. It showed something more concrete. The information changed, but his approach did not. For Simone, that distinction mattered. She had never argued that Willis was forbidden from approaching her. The issue was whether authority could remain reasonable when the facts supporting its use kept changing. By the end of the initial evidence review, the balance of the story had shifted completely. Willis had controlled the hallway because his position gave him immediate authority. Now the recordings controlled the inquiry because they showed what information had actually been available at each decision point. The review had enough evidence to evaluate the incident itself. The next procedural step was narrower. Investigators would examine Willis's relevant personnel history to determine whether this encounter stood alone or whether any prior documented complaint contained conduct similar enough to matter. The review of Willis's personnel history did not uncover a hidden scandal, a string of proven violations, or evidence that courthouse officials had knowingly ignored repeated misconduct. What it did reveal was one earlier complaint that now required a closer look. 6 months before Simone's encounter with Willis, a black female public defender had reported being stopped while entering a courthouse work area and subjected to repeated credential questions after identifying herself and explaining where she was going. Her complaint stated that white attorneys entering the same area appeared to receive less scrutiny. Willis had denied treating her differently, and the earlier review had been unable to establish a policy violation because there was no body camera sequence or sufficiently complete security footage showing comparable interactions. The complaint had therefore been closed without a misconduct finding. The current investigators did not treat that unresolved allegation as proof of what Willis had done to Simone. They did not need to. This time, the evidence stood on its own. The earlier complaint mattered only because it described a similar concern about how Willis evaluated identity and access when dealing with a black woman in a professional courthouse setting. When Simone was informed that relevant personnel history had been reviewed, she listened without interrupting. She felt no satisfaction in learning that another woman had once raised a similar concern. If anything, it complicated her anger. Was the earlier complaint substantiated? She asked. No, the administrator told her. There was not enough evidence for a finding. Simone nodded. Then do not turn it into something it was not. The administrator seemed slightly surprised. Simone continued, if it provides relevant context, use it as context. Judge this incident on the evidence from this incident. That distinction was important to her. She wanted accountability, but she did not want the process distorted in her favor any more than she wanted it distorted against her. Willis was entitled to have his conduct evaluated accurately, just as she had been entitled to have her identity evaluated accurately in the hallway. Later, when investigators asked whether Simone wanted to recommend a specific disciplinary outcome, she declined. That decision should belong to the people assigned to make it, she said. I want the record to say what the evidence says. By then, the evidence was no longer ambiguous about the sequence. The current incident no longer depended on the earlier complaint to establish what happened. The recordings already did that. The older case mattered for a narrower reason. It gave reviewers context for deciding whether Willis's exercise of discretion deserved closer scrutiny. The prior complaint could not prove motive, and Simone did not ask anyone to claim that it did. What it could do was give reviewers a reason to consider whether the current incident reflected an isolated lapse in judgment or a recurring problem in how Willis exercised discretion. That question would be addressed through the disciplinary process, not through another confrontation between Willis and Simone. The investigative phase was now essentially complete. The existing record was sufficient to reconstruct the encounter without relying on speculation. The body camera, courthouse video, dispatch records, radio traffic, and Willis's own explanation were ready for final review. What remained was no longer a search for more evidence. It was a decision about what the evidence already established. The final review drew a clear line between Willis's first decision and everything that followed. Approaching Simone had been reasonable. Continuing to treat her as the likely defendant after contradictory information accumulated was not. Investigators found that Willis failed to reassess his suspicion, bypassed readily available verification, applied inconsistent scrutiny, and used force disproportionate to the circumstances captured on video. The finding did not claim that investigators could prove every thought in Willis's mind. It did not need to. His conduct could be evaluated through the decisions he made and the information available when he made them. The earlier complaint from the Black public defender remained what it had always been, an unsubstantiated complaint. It was noted as relevant context, but was not converted into proof after the fact. The disciplinary decision rested primarily on the current incident and its objective record. Willis was removed from his courthouse security assignment and subjected to formal discipline, including required remedial training and a period of heightened supervisory review. The consequence came through the disciplinary process rather than through a dramatic decision made in the hallway. The process had taken time, examined evidence, allowed his explanation to be considered, and produced consequences tied to the violations that could actually be established. Courthouse administrators also approved a change in security procedure. When officers were working from broad descriptions and readily available identification could resolve uncertainty, they were expected to use that verification before escalating an encounter unless an immediate safety concern made doing so impractical. The change was not written for judges. It applied to defendants, attorneys, employees, witnesses, visitors, and anyone else moving through the building. When Simone received the final findings, she read them privately. There was no celebration. She had never wanted the review to declare her important enough to deserve better treatment. What mattered was a sentence near the center of the determination. The reasonableness of Willis's actions depended on the information available to him at each stage, not on Simone Carter's professional status. That was the answer she had wanted from the beginning. If she had been a teacher, a receptionist, an unemployed visitor, or anyone else with no authority inside that courthouse, the same evidence would still have required Willis to reconsider his assumption. The institutional question was finished. Willis had been given a process, Simone had been given a record, and the courthouse had been forced to examine how discretion could become unequal when verification was available but ignored. In the weeks that followed, Simone returned to the ordinary work of courtroom 4B. Then one morning, a familiar name appeared on the docket assigned to her courtroom, Tanya Brooks. Simone immediately asked that the matter be reassigned to another judge. She knew exactly who Tanya was now, and she did not want the incident involving Willis to create even the appearance that Tanya's case might be treated differently. Several weeks later, the courthouse felt ordinary again, which was exactly what Simone wanted. Willis was no longer assigned to courthouse security. His formal discipline and supervisory review were in effect, and officers working the building had begun using the revised verification procedure. The change was quiet. There were no speeches in the hallway and no signs announcing why it existed. Officers simply had clearer instructions to verify identity when reliable information was readily available before allowing an uncertain assumption to become a more intrusive encounter. Simone had taken no part in deciding Willis's discipline, and she had no role in supervising him afterward. The consequence belonged to the process she had insisted on protecting. That morning, Tanya Brooks's reassigned matter was heard in another courtroom. Simone deliberately stayed away from the proceeding. Later, after Tanya's case had concluded and she was leaving the courthouse, she saw Simone in the public hallway and hesitated before approaching. Tanya was a black woman close to Simone's age, dressed simply for court and visibly nervous. "Your Honor, may I say something? It is not about my case." Simone studied her for a moment, then nodded. Briefly, Tanya swallowed. "I heard what happened that morning. They were looking for me." Simone waited. "I went to the wrong office after security," Tanya continued. "I did not realize where I was supposed to check in. If I had just gone where they told me." Her voice faded. Simone understood what Tanya was trying to carry, and she refused to let her carry it. "Ms. Brooks, you made a mistake about where you were supposed to report." Tanya lowered her eyes. "Yes, ma'am. That mistake did not make Officer Willis do what he did." Tanya looked up again. "But they would not have been looking for me if I had been where I was supposed to be." "That is true," Simone said. "But being the reason someone starts looking is not the same as being responsible for the decisions they make while they are looking." Tanya was silent for a moment, then nodded. Simone wished her well and watched her leave. There was something unexpectedly settling about the encounter. For weeks, Tanya Brooks had existed in the story as a name attached to an error. Now Simone had finally seen the person behind that name. and she was simply another woman trying to deal with the consequences of her own ordinary mistake. Simone would not turn her into a symbol, an excuse, or someone else to blame. Later, after the courtroom emptied, Thomas gathered several files from the clerk's table. Before leaving, he paused. "Can I ask you something?" Simone closed the folder in front of her. "Go ahead. That morning, why did you not just tell Willis you were the judge assigned to 4B? It probably would have ended everything immediately." Simone considered the question. She knew Thomas was not criticizing her. In practical terms, he was probably right. 3 words might have changed Willis's behavior. But that was precisely what had stayed with her. "Because I had already told him who I was," she said. Thomas waited. Simone looked toward the quiet courtroom doors. Simone Carter should have been enough. Thomas gave a small nod and left without adding anything. Simone remained for another moment before gathering her papers. The courthouse would continue after her, after Willis, and after Tanya. People would keep entering its doors carrying different histories, different jobs, different mistakes, and different amounts of power. Perhaps that is what made the quiet change in procedure matter more than any dramatic punishment could have. Sometimes fairness is tested before anyone knows a person's resume, title, connections, or importance. A name may seem like a small thing, but listening when someone gives it can be the beginning of recognizing that person as an individual rather than as an assumption. There is also a harder thought worth sitting with. An honest first mistake and an unfair decision can exist in the same sequence. What matters may be whether new information is allowed to change the judgment that came before it. Simone could not undo that morning, but she helped make sure the record told the truth about it without demanding that her position make the truth more valuable. And perhaps there was dignity in that, too. If you had been in Simone's position, how would you have balanced your anger with the need for a fair process? What part of her decision would have been hardest for you to make in that moment?